Welcome into Shot and Vip, a podcast brought to you by Inside Carolina this football season by our friends over at Johnny T-Shirt. Co-hosting this, I'm Taylor Vippolis, and as always, I'm joined by my fellow Carolina football letterman and teammate Jeff Schoettmer. Shot Carolina underdogs for the first time all season, a 7.5-point underdog at Death Valley against Clemson. Carolina had their opportunities. They lose 31-20. Falling to 8-3 now on the season. Initial thoughts?
The biggest thing with me was in this match, on paper, there's not a huge discrepancy in talent between the two rosters. This is as evenly matched as a Clemson, North Carolina game as we had in the last 10 to 15 years. And, I'm disappointed in the loss, but more disappointed that we really didn't have a chance to win it. There wasn't a drive at the end of the game where Drake May could have let us down to kick a field goal or score a go-ahead touchdown to win the game. It was kind of the game was out of hand in the fourth quarter, and that's what bothered me. Is it was similar to last year's game in terms of they in the AC championship where they beat us by a good margin, but this game I totally expected us to be very competitive all the way down to the end, or even have a chance to win it, and for us to be down 17 in the fourth quarter and not really have a puncher's chance to win is what hurt me the most. Is for the last 2-3 years we've been talking about how much talent we're accumulating and how much talent we have on our roster, and then we don't do anything with it. It's a very similar feeling to last year, and honestly the last couple of years, where we started out strong and then faded away towards the end of the season. And the great teams are the teams that get better as the season goes on. And this year, we look like a team that we peaked mid-season, and now we're slowly on a decline. And it's frustrating because, like, you look at a team like Georgia, and they kind of stumble early on and don't play their best, but as the season progresses, they get better and better each week. And for us, the last couple of weeks, we kind of have degressed, and that's not the sign of a good football team. So I guess the overall takeaway is disappointment, as it has been the last couple of weeks, other than obviously the Duke game. But just us with the talent level we have at the roster, Drake May being the special talent he is, just for us not to even have a chance to win the game at the end of the game is really the most disappointing thing for me.
Yeah, and this game mirrored the ACC championship game against Clemson last year, where North Carolina had their opportunities, and if you're just looking at the numbers and what each team did, the final score really doesn't tell the full story, because in that first half, North Carolina had opportunities to go up 21-0 and put this Clemson team on the ropes, where I thought watching this Clemson team, we talk about closing the gap between North Carolina and the Clemsons, but this is as gettable a Clemson team as there's going to be. Their quarterback, Cade Klubnik, it looks like they're trying to hide him for a lot of what they're doing offensively. It doesn't look like there's a ton of trust there. And to not take advantage of some of the opportunities that this North Carolina team had and put Clemson on their back foot and trying to play catch up and keeping them in this game when you're like, man, North Carolina should be up 21-0 at half. And instead they're down 14-7. And with Clemson getting the ball, it just never felt like North Carolina was really in it, even though they had opportunities to put Clemson away and really take the crowd out of it in Death Valley. And that was my first time in Death Valley, because I wasn't on the travel squad when you guys played them in 2014, and taking that crowd out of the game and, putting that doubt in Clemson's sidelines head, like they never really had that, because Clemson was the ones making all the energy plays, and they were feeding off their crowd. And yeah, it's disappointing, because I think one of the things we make fun of the Miami team for is that they're front runners, where they'll start a season off good, and the second a little bit of adversity hits them, their season kind of spirals out of control. And these past couple of years, North Carolina has had a lot of those tendencies where they're ranked inside the top 10. Everybody in the fan base is so excited, and they lose a game that they're not supposed to, and the bottom falls out of the team completely. What would you say was the difference in this North Carolina Clemson game?
I mean, if you look at the stats, they're damn near identical. The passing yards, the rushing yards, third down, fourth down conversion percentage, even the special teams, the punting, our punter did a great job. Our punt return units were even, even penalties. It was, I think, we had 2 more penalties than Clemson, but the difference obviously in the game, everyone knows, is the 2 fumbles, and we'll get to that later in the pod. But I think the biggest thing was Clemson's D-line was affecting Drake way more than our D-line was affecting Klubnik. And then the coaching decision before the half was a huge pivotal turning point in the game to me. So, Clemson has obviously recruited very, very well the last couple of years, and they're known for their D-line, elite secondary play. But, their ability to rush 4 and affect Drake, Drake was bothered all night. He didn't look, he had flashes of really good play, and he made some plays with his legs, but the whole night he was rushed. He was under duress, and that completely affected our team. And then obviously the coaching decision right before the half for us to play a pretty good first half, and for us to, be in the position we were, tied with the ball after 2 catastrophic turnovers in inside the 10-yard line, and for us to go into half with either a lead or, be tied was a huge momentum swing in the game. And, that was the difference. So we'll get into that, but I can't underestimate how big that coaching decision was for us to, give them the ball back. And I know there was a bad turn or a bad penalty that on Klubnik's interception, but that our defense never should have been in that situation. So that's the difference in the game. It was Clemson's D-line to me. Obviously, I stated that the 2 turnovers, everyone, you don't even have to know football to understand those 2 turnovers by Hampton completely changed the dynamic of the game. But, our coaching did not, do anything stellar to help us win this game.
Yeah, not only did the coaching staff not do anything stellar to help Carolina win this game, it feels like it's the complete opposite, where they're putting players in bad spots, and they're costing this North Carolina team, or putting this North Carolina team in a hole, and it's the players that are having to try to dig out of it. And I think some of that is a 2-sided coin, where yes, there's times where the players are in the right positions, and we'll talk about that later, and they're just not making plays. But there's also the irrefutable part of it, where the clock management and some of the choices that this North Carolina staff makes time and time again is costing them a lot of points in a lot of situations. And we'll get into that more. But sticking with the offense, some good, some bad. Starting with the bad, you mentioned the D-line for Clemson. A lot of times they're rushing 4, Carolina has 5 in protection, or Clemson rushes 5 and North Carolina has 6 in protection. But that offensive line just looks so overwhelmed every time teams bring pressure. NC State is another team that's going to bring a lot of pressure with a strong defensive front. What are you kind of seeing up front with this North Carolina team, and just the bad that you're getting from this North Carolina offense, especially in this Clemson game?
It's kind of ironic because the strength of our offensive line all year has been the pass protection. I think we've been better at protecting than running the ball. Obviously, I mean, we have Hampton who makes up for a lot, but let's start with the good, I guess. So our ability to run the ball, I thought they did a good job in how they kind of knocked Clemson off the ball a little bit at times and opened up holes for Hampton to run. And yes, he did run through the linebackers and the safeties and outran the post safety a bunch, but our ability to run for 250 yards against a good Clemson defense is something to pat ourselves on the back with. And I know they only had a few sacks. I think they had 4, and maybe 2 of them Drake could have gotten the ball out, but they ended up hurting us in the long run of Drake and our pass protection kind of breaking down. And then, what's most obvious is the 2 turnovers we had. Drake had an interception at the end, but the game was kind of out of hand at that point. Obviously the 2 turnovers by Hampton were catastrophic. And I think as we dive into it, the first one was just an elite play by the Clemson defender. I mean,
Wiggins,
by Wiggins. I mean, he's a first-round draft pick, and that play is going to be shown on every draft highlight of his. It's going to be shown in an effort tape of every defensive team going forward. Just his ability to not get up in the play, and he totally transformed the game. We were about to take a 14-0 lead, and him knocking the ball out, just last ditch effort play of, he was, at least 5 yards behind Hampton, showed elite speed of him being able to track Hampton down and find the ball and punch it out.
An easy play to give up on.
Such an easy play to give up. He was getting blocked by the receiver, and he wasn't even the main point of contact on the play. And I don't know what you tell Hampton in that situation. He is outrunning the closest defender to him. He's on the sideline. He's got the ball high and tight. That's just an elite play by the Clemson defense. And I think on both fumbles, Hampton, he truly, it wasn't a bad fumble in my eyes. I mean, if you look at the fumble where he got hit on the 7-yard line, Willie Lampkin, if you go back and watch that play, he is pile drive 3 yards in the backfield. Hampton has to jump cut and make a catastrophic, change of direction play. And he kind of changes the ball from his right to his left to avoid the defensive lineman. And I don't think he ever had a good grasp on the ball. So both of those plays, I truly think they're just really good and unlucky plays on our part. But, they ended up having a huge, huge impact on the game. I think the bigger play is the, us getting down to the 2-yard line and us false starting on, first and goal from the 2-yard line. The next play we get up there, we try to run it quick, and I think our left guard or left tackle jumps off sides, and now we get the ball back to the 7. If you have 4 plays from the 2-yard line, I think we have a pretty good chance of getting that ball in the end zone. So I think that's an underrated play of the game that kind of spiraled and caused the turnover on the next play. So yeah, it was a mix of good and bad. I mean, Drake like I said, he looked under duress all night. I don't think our receivers did a great job of getting open. But us having the ability to hand the ball to Hampton and him making really, really talented linebackers look average. The 2 guys that are going to both get drafted in the first 3 rounds next year. Obviously, they have an elite D-line. They have secondary that's going to play in the NFL, and he made all of them look silly. So we have a special talent at running back, and him being able to outrun the secondary up until them punching the ball out was just, it was a sight to see. I mean, yes, he had 2 turnovers, but he had an elite game, and he showed, his worth, that he should be offered a lot of money next year to come join someone else's program if so.
Yeah, you mentioned the wide receivers. I thought everybody outside of Tez Walker struggled to create separation. There were a few plays where Tez probably should have drawn a flag, but the refs were letting them play, and Clemson in that atmosphere with the crowd behind them and the refs behind the crowd, they were letting them play. And, they weren't calling them on North Carolina. They weren't calling them on Clemson. And Clemson really took that as a challenge and pressed North Carolina and banked on their pressure getting home and disrupting Drake May before North Carolina could create some separation. Although there were a few times where Drake escaped pressure, and the receivers, they should be, running that scramble drill and trying to find space. And there were a few times where I'm watching from the press box, and it just looked like receivers were kind of giving up on the play. And you mentioned the Omar and Hampton 2 fumbles. I think it's something you almost have to live with if you're North Carolina. He's had 200 plus carries going into that game without a fumble. He has 2 fumbles in his first 7 snaps. It's just the way the ball kind of bounced that game. Nothing that he really did or at fault for him. You'd obviously love if he doesn't fumble inside the 10 twice in that kind of environment. But I saw fans being like, after the second fumble, being like, you have to sit him. You have to sit him. You don't sit the best running back in the country because of 2 fumbles. And I was encouraged by North Carolina showing that confidence in him, where he finishes with 178 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns, averaging 9.4 yards per carry. What did you think of the decision?
He proved his worth with the touchdown he had in the third quarter.
Yes.
Like, there are very few running backs in the country that, first of all, break tackles of those Clemson linebackers and then outrun both the corner and the post safety who have an angle on them. So Amari and Hampton was not our issue. Yeah, he had 2 catastrophic plays that, like I said, they were really good plays by Clemson's defense. But, credit to our coaching staff. That was probably the best decision they made all day, and keep feeding him the rock, because he was making people look silly, running through tackles and running around people. So I was glad to see him, stay in the game, because he was not the issue.
Yeah, and going into this back stretch of the season, he's pretty sure he's tied with Ollie Gordon from Oklahoma State for most rushing yards in the country. And Gordon's probably going to have the advantage of playing in the conference championship game, most likely, if Oklahoma State makes it to versus Texas. So Gordon's going to have a game advantage on him. But the fact that we're even talking about a North Carolina running back being in the rushing title conversation is impressive, and shows that Hampton is playing at an All-American level, despite the 2 fumbles that really set back the North Carolina team against Clemson. But before we talk about the defense, let me remind everybody about our friends at Johnny T-Shirt. You could visit them on Franklin Street or on johnnyt-shirt.com, and they have everything that you could possibly want for the Carolina fan as we get closer to the holiday season, the basketball season, the end of the football season. They have the jerseys, the T-shirts, the hats. It's getting colder. They have the cold gear. Go shop at Johnny T-Shirt. It's great people and great customer service. And don't forget, Inside Carolina premium subscribers save 10% off their orders. All right, Schott, the defense. Some people said the defense played good enough to win. Some people said, it's more of the same at times with the defense. What were your kind of thoughts with the defense in regards to this Clemson game?
I mean, let's start with the good. I think they kind of are who they are, and who they've shown the last couple of games is they go through periods of the game where they play really well. They're locked in. They can get 3 and outs. They can get stops when needed. But then there's also stretches of the game where they look like they aren't focused. They forget how to tackle. They forget how to run to the ball. They blow assignments. They blow coverages. So it's just like, it's a hot and cold defense. And we still haven't figured out how to put a complete game together other than the South Carolina game. The bad was just, not being able to respond when the offense goes down and scores. There was a period in the third quarter where Clemson's up 21-7. Our offense goes down and scores to cut the game to 21-14. So, okay, what do you expect from our defense? We need the biggest, best drive of the game from them. We need them to go out and get Clemson to punt, or make them have a long drive, or hold them to a field goal. And what do they do? The first play that, Will Shipley goes for 35 yards because of our defensive tackle can't stay in the right gap. And that's just like a microcosm of our defense for the whole year. Is just, death by 1,000 paper cuts. They make one mistake, and then that mistake builds off the next. And, now we look up and Clemson's running the ball in the end zone, and now they're up 21-7, despite what they did the last, couple of drives where they, forced 3 and outs and forced punts. And the other thing that I noticed was just, we had so many missed tackles from unblocked defenders once again. And this was the same thing in the Duke game, where we had guys that were unblocked that would meet Clemson's running back in the hole or 5 yards downfield, and we were unable to bring them down. And, that showed up again and again. Even our best players trying to tackle Shipley, we couldn't get it done. and we saw it from everybody. We saw it from Rucker. We saw it from Cedric Gray. We saw it from Power Eccles. We saw it from Stick Lane, Chapman. I mean, everyone's to blame. It wasn't just one or two guys. It was, 5 or 6, 7 guys on our defense that could not bring down Clemson's skill guys. And I think that was, ultimately the difference in the game.
Yeah, watching that game, I remember thinking, I can't wait to see the final numbers for how many missed tackles Carolina had, because it felt like it was going to be a season high. They missed 16 tackles. It was a lot of flat-footed defenders where Maffa, Shipley, and Klubnik were kind of the ones initiating the contact or seeking out the contact, and it was North Carolina being, the ones reacting instead of the ones initiating. And it's been a problem where teams are saying, hey, you guys aren't going to be as physical as us, and then the team not responding to the challenge. And you talk to Mack Brown. One of the problems that I have with this coaching staff is in the press conferences, they're like, yeah, the defense, they get tired. We have to play more players. And then Saturday comes along and everybody's snap count is in the high 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, where it doesn't even feel like they're building depth. It doesn't feel like there's any trust in the players behind it, and they just keep rolling out the same defense. And that kind of brought one of the next points that I was going to bring up. The safeties. The safeties look like they're being targeted every play. It's something we've talked about a lot on this podcast. And there was one penalty where just talking about that accountability and having depth and trusting the guys behind you. There was one penalty that I remember thinking where Carolina kept having these self-inflicted penalties. There was the horse collar tackle from a D lineman where it races what would have been a 3rd and long, keeps Clemson in a more second and manageable. But the other one was Chapman gets a unnecessary roughness penalty where he suplexes a wide receiver. From your experience watching football, how many teams in the country do you think takes that player out, where North Carolina keeps them in the game? He misses a tackle on one of the following plays, and it just doesn't seem like there's any like repercussions for if you have one of these really bad plays, because North Carolina, they're just going to keep rolling you out and they're just going to keep playing.
Well, I'll say I hate that rule as a defender. Having played defense, I think a tackle is a tackle, and regardless if you suplex them or get a form tackle, it's the same thing in my opinion. We've kind of lost the art of physicality in football, so I get it. The rules are the rules, and our safeties should not suplex guys to the ground. But Don knew right then. I think he kind of laid off after he threw him, but to your point, yeah, like if that happens and you have a big penalty in an important drive, most teams do take off that player from the field and sub in somebody else to kind of like sit him down and learn his lesson. But I think Don's played a lot of football, and our coaches think that he's the best guy to make the calls and make the checks and ultimately do his job. So it was a key situation in the game and late in the first half, and I guess it didn't end up hurting us because they ended up fumbling on that drive. But to your point, most teams have enough depth where they can take off that player and plug in somebody else, and kind of like, hey, you got to sit on the bench and watch because you really hurt our team in that instance. But look, that wasn't the that didn't make a huge impact on the game, but yeah, it was a critical penalty in a situation. And
it's more of a trend with this team where people talk about the players not having accountability, and they're playing such a high snap count number, and there is that disconnect between the starters playing a lot on defense and the defense kind of falling apart late, and there's just no trust in playing depth, even though that every press conference they say they're gonna play more people. And the other point that you mentioned that I wanted to bring up was not being able to respond when the offense goes down and score. Because if I tell you big moment in the game, and this is where my problem comes with the defense, big moment in the game, the defense needs to get a stop. What's your level of confidence that the defense can get a stop? Because the Duke game, we saw it. The Georgia Tech game, we saw it. The Clemson game, we saw it. Where's your level of confidence there?
It's not high at all. And the issue with that is, like, at key moments in the game, whether you're on offense, defense, and special teams, you should have your best play calls where you think that side of the ball can execute at the highest level. And when when we score to cut the lead to 21-14, and we know we have to get a stop, our defensive coordinator and our defensive staff should be calling the calls that, by this point in the game, it's the third quarter. We've seen what Clemson's offense has shown. They've been trying to run the ball. They've had success running the ball. So, all right, let's put our best 11 in the game. Let's have our best run defense call, and let's execute it at a high level. And that's not what happened. I mean, they went right down the field in, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 plays. I mean, it felt like it was in 3 plays. And then they grew the lead to 14 points. But, yeah, to answer your question, it's the level of trust in them getting a stop when we need it. It's not high right now. And when I say right now, I mean, we're 11 games into the season. So I don't know, how we're going to fix that, but hopefully we can get it done for the NC State game.
And we mentioned talking about some of the coaching errors from this North Carolina team. What did you see from Mack Brown and staff that kind of put North Carolina behind the 8 ball?
The biggest one was the one right before the half. In my opinion, each game is completely different. You have to know the variables and how they change constantly as the game goes along. And the point we were, right before the half, we're tied 7-7. You have to know your opponent, what their strength is. So, we have the ball, on our 20-yard line, and the strength of the Clemson defense is the pass rush and the secondary. So for us to navigate a 2-minute drive right before the half, going 80 yards is we haven't shown that all day. What we've been able to do as an offense is run the ball, and that's not really what you want to do in a 2-minute drive. So I think for our coaching staff to understand that, maybe this isn't the best time to be aggressive. It's not the same as, we're playing Virginia at home or Duke at home. Like, it's a completely different atmosphere. You have to know where you're playing. We're having a 2-minute drive versus Clemson at Clemson. Their fans are going to be rowdy. It's going to be hard for us to get plays off. It's going to be hard for us to communicate. I think you have to take into effect the result of the first play of a drive. In any 2-minute situation, the first play, the drive starter, is the most important play. And most of the time, teams start with a screen, draw, run, kind of to get the offense moving, to get some rhythm. And what was our first play? It was a sack of 8 yards. So right then, you have to readjust your coaching. You can't just, run the same plays that you think you were going to run if you had a 7-yard gain. It's a completely different train of thought now. You're on your own 15-yard line. It's 2nd and 18, and you're tied 7-7. You've kind of dodged a bullet because of how the first half is went at this point. And then, so just for us to make that coaching error of calling a timeout, because at the end of the day, if we don't call a timeout, Clemson scores with 2 seconds to go in the first half, so that play never would have existed. And we go into the half 7-7. And I know there was a lot of variables with, the interception of Klubnik being overturned by the penalty. And honestly, the thing that I was most disappointed about in Klubnik's touchdown at right before the half was it was a drop back pass, and he scrambles, but he's got a spy and Power Eccles. And first of all, Javari Ritzie gets off a block and goes to tackle him low, but Power Eccles is sitting there unblocked with the opportunity to tackle Klubnik, our middle linebacker, one of our best tacklers, against an opponent's quarterback, hits him at the 4-yard line. He spins off of him and gets a touchdown. So just so many factors go into it, but just we should never have been in that situation with our coaching staff not calling a timeout and going into the half. Hopefully it's 7-7, knowing that Clemson gets the ball. So them scoring right before the half and then them getting the ball at the start of the second half it was kind of deflating for our whole team.
Yeah, the counter to that timeout would be that maybe Dabo would have taken a timeout, but we really don't know what Dabo would have done in that situation because it seemed like Mack Brown raced to the official to get that timeout in. And even if Clemson does take a timeout there, North Carolina taking a timeout essentially gave Clemson a free timeout.
It
And
gave
I
him
don't
30 more seconds.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure that Clemson would have taken a timeout there because it's a 2nd and 18. In the back of their mind, they're thinking Drake May does have this big enough arm to maybe make a play and get some of this yardage back, even though we do have a great pass rush. And they're getting the ball at half. I think that's another reason why maybe they don't take a timeout there. They're knowing that their defense is playing so well. They're getting the ball out of the break. Don't do anything that allows North Carolina to get any sort of momentum back. And I think those kind of decisions, and for me the cherry on top was the 2-point try where the analytics are saying go for two, make an 11-point game, a 9-point game. That's neither here nor there. The problem that a lot of people had with that decision is the play clock's running down. They burn a timeout knowing that it's still going to be a 2-score game. Whether you get the 2-point conversion or not, you're going to need those timeouts back. And for me, when I'm watching this game, I'm watching a staff that just looks lost in making these choices, because this is not a one-off. This is a staff that has made these kind of clock management choices time and time again. And these are the decisions that kind of sum up what Mack Brown 2.0 has been for me, where you're looking at your quarterback, you're looking at Drake May, you're looking at Sam Howell, and you're like, not for this Clemson game in particular, but you're looking at some of these games where North Carolina is losing, and you're like, you're essentially spotting these other teams so many points with the opportunities, and you're banking on Drake May or Sam Howell going in these heroic modes. And the part of the fan base that I kind of want to push back against on a notion that I've seen around social media is, something the fan base has said, like Mack Brown is the best North Carolina could do in terms of a head coach. And there's some parts where it's like, yeah, he deserves credit for getting Sam Howell and Drake May to Chapel Hill, but he also deserves blame for wasting those talents. And why North Carolina is in a position where 5 seasons with 2 NFL quarterbacks, we need to win out this season to get to double digits for the first time in that stretch. And there's one conference title game appearance to show for it. And the part where it's like Mack Brown's the best North Carolina could do, it's like the past two decades of North Carolina football, we saw Butch Davis, where he had the team trending upwards as a consistent 8-win team before the NCAA mess. North Carolina wins the division twice under Fedora, where Fedora gets to 11 wins. And the mindset where people are like, North Carolina can't do better than Mack Brown, it's just like a terrible mentality. It's the ACC. It's not the SEC. You're a school where if you have a quarterback, you'll have 7 to 8 wins success. That was the problem that Fedora ran into 2017, 2018. And this team, really outside of the quarterback position, we're not too far off of those 2017, 2018 teams where a quarterback is the difference between us winning and losing. And your coaches the past 2 decades have kind of proven that other people outside of Mack Brown can win here. So while I do think Mack Brown deserves a lot of credit for righting the ship and getting North Carolina football back on the right track and getting some of their relevance back, like I just don't understand the thought of North Carolina can't do better than Mack Brown. And that's not even to say like I want Mack Brown out. It's just the fan base that I've seen where it's like they're just playing like this defeated, like this is what we have to accept. This is who we are. And the other thing the last thing I'll push back on is the fans that are saying like you just have to replace the defensive coordinator. There's been very little to suggest from North Carolina that just replacing a defensive coordinator is going to work. And there's very little confidence in this staff finding a replacement for somebody like Coach Chizik, who, has had his success here. He's had his failures here, but we forget Mack Brown hired Greg Robinson. We forget Mack Brown hired Jay Bateman. We forget Mack Brown hired Gene Chizik, where four coordinators in 6 seasons. I know Greg Robinson never coached a game, but there's just very little. I just don't have confidence in the staff to just say, hey, we just have to replace a coordinator. But let me get down from my soapbox. Any thoughts there?
I just think the way college football is trending right now in terms of, you see it all over the place with a head coach coming in for 2-3 seasons and even less and getting fired. I think there needs to be some sense of stability, and it's not going to happen overnight. And I understand that Coach Brown's been here for 5 years now, but the easiest thing to do is just blame the defensive coordinator or the offensive coordinator and just fire and rehire next guy and put all the stress on him. I think it starts at the top. Obviously, maybe Mack needs to have some culture adjustments on how he operates, because I think the team kind of takes the identity of the head coach, and it starts with him. So hiring and firing offensive and defensive coordinators and special teams coordinators, at the end of the day, there's only so many football plays you can run, so many schemes you can run. They're all pretty similar. Obviously different coordinators are better recruiters or culture builders or motivators, but it's a tough. There's no. I think if I think Bubba Cunningham is probably sitting back thinking, what's the right decision in all of this, because one rash decision could change the course of Carolina football for a couple of years, and it could have a bigger impact than what you think. So I personally believe if Coach Fedora and Mack Brown and Butch Davis combined all of their strengths, then we would have a really, really good coach. I don't think we'd have Nick Saban. I don't think we'd have Kirby Smart, but I think if you could draw from, pick, Mack Brown's, charismatic recruiting nature and Butch Davis's, defensive philosophy and Coach Fedora's special teams mindset and offensive, prowess, then I think you'd have a really good coach. So, I know that's not realistic, but that's kind of.
I think that's called Nick Saban.
I don't think it's Nick Saban or Kirby Smart. I think they're still a level above that, but I think each of those coaches had their strengths, but and weaknesses, obviously. And I'm not one to call for someone's head about getting them fired, because they've obviously, have their strengths, and we have made a transformation under Coach Brown. But at the end of the day, it's a production business, and we haven't had a 10-win season since he's been back. And, that's something we can still accomplish. And, glass half full guy over here, I'm going to say we can beat State, win a bowl game, and get to 10 wins, our first 10-win season since 2015. So, that's how I'm going to leave that.
Before we wrap up this episode, big shout out to our friends at Congruity. Congruity is a North Carolina-based national coverage, local presence company with personal support straight from the Tar Heel State. They are empowering small and mid-sized business owners with HR and payroll outsourcing, enabling you to grow your business while they take care of your greatest assets, your people. And they are doing it with top-of-the-line technology and services for every stage of your business's growth with a state-of-the-art online platform. And they are obsessed with customer service. They become part of your team. They do the heavy lifting, providing essential admin support with a single point of contact and support available on demand with services that are tailor-made, transforming your organization. Congruity has helped hundreds of businesses improve and enhance their day-to-day lives, level up your HR capabilities, save money, unlock game-changing growth. Visit congruityhr.com/Tar Heels to learn more about Congruity. Fill out a quick form to be connected to their consultants, and they'll give Inside Carolina listeners and viewers a payroll and HR assessment for free. That's congruityhr.com/Tar Heels. Shot, the way Congruity makes it easier for businesses. We're trying to make gambling easier. We were coming off a 2-0 week. You got cocky. You picked Washington, and then you also picked Carolina +7.5. So you split 1-1. Your record's 4-4 on the year. I took Iowa -4. I knew it was going to be a hold your nose type bet. Iowa wins by 2. I saw at one point in that game it was 2-0. But it's one I'm going back to the drawing board trying to get the people a winner. I will start. I'm going Michigan -4 in the big game against Ohio State. I'm not too worried about if Harbaugh is there or not. A lot of noise in the Michigan program, but just watching them, I feel like they're a more consistent team than this Ohio State team, and Michigan is at home. I trust Michigan a bit more than Ohio State, who Ohio State seems like they're heavily reliant on Marvin Harrison Jr. to bail out their offense at times. So I'm going Michigan -4 to get back on my win streak. Where are you going?
I like that pick. I'm going to go elsewhere. I'm going to go recency bias. I'm going to get cocky again and do 2 more picks. I'm going to start with UNC. We're 2-point favorites against State. I think we win this game and get to 9 wins. And then I'm going to go with Clemson -7 over South Carolina. I think Clemson's kind of turned the corner the last couple of weeks, and they look like a legit football team now. So South Carolina, obviously, it's a common opponent. We played them, and I think Clemson's just way more talented, and they got some payback to do from last year's game at Clemson. So I'm going Clemson to cover 7 points, and I'm going UNC to cover 2.
We will see about that North Carolina NC State game. It's an 8 p.m. kickoff from Carter Finley. We'll be back next week to break it all down. Shotman, appreciate the time as always, and appreciate everybody watching and listening.